Looking at the next concept, which is Christianity, I always preface when I talk about religion like this. Number one, I'm not here to discuss theology or beliefs or, truthfully, I don't care, what your faith may or may not be. All right? We are sticking strictly to the best historical facts, okay, that we can. If I offend you, too bad. All right, because we're just sticking to history, all right? And, if you wish to have a theological discussion, we could do it after class or at some other point in time. But for now, strictly just looking at a historical perspective, okay? Why do we talk about it here and now? Well, Christianity is one of the, most important, religions today. And it started during this time period within the boundaries of the Roman Empire. Okay, so, in order to give you as complete a history as possible, we have to include the birth of Christianity. All right, now, having said that, remember that the Roman pantheon, all right, the Romans were polytheistic. They believed in many, many, many gods, okay? Upon encountering the Greeks, they adopted the Greek system, changing the Greek gods into, giving them Roman names, but they still had the same, qualities and attributes. They called Zeus Jupiter, and Jupiter was chief of the gods. Okay, they called Aphrodite Venus, and Venus was the goddess of love, just like amongst the Greeks. They called Ares Mars, and Mars was the god of war, so that didn't change, etc., etc., etc. Okay, I guess I could say, Poseidon became Neptune and god of the ocean. All right, now, when the Romans took over an area, okay, they did not force their religion on the conquered area. They did not expect you as a, someone that they had taken over to accept their beliefs. The only thing that they asked, and they let you keep whatever belief you had before. They let you continue worshiping whatever god, religion, animal, plant, whatever. You just had to acknowledge the Roman gods, okay? Acknowledge that they existed, number one, and a representative of your group had to be present whenever there was a Roman celebration, okay? So, to honor the god Saturn during Saturnalia, you sent a representative of your group, of your people, and that was it. Like, you didn't even have to participate. You just had to be there, okay? That's it, all right? Nothing else, all right? Now, fast forward. At some point, the Romans conquer the province of Judea, all right? Promise I'll come back. I just need to show you, oops, wrong way. I need to show you the map, all right? Judea is right here, okay? And yes, it's been called Judea ever since the Persians took it over, Alexander, okay, the Seleucids, and it is where the remnant and the majority of the Jewish people, okay, lived. All right. Now, just when the Romans established the empire, and when the emperors established their 40 province system, okay, the Roman emperor appoints a governor, a Roman, to go and be the governor of Judea. Okay, this person is not Jewish. This person does not know anything or anyone or whatever. And so, like, I mentioned on Friday, all right, basically, the governor of Judea enlists groups of locals to help him administer, to give him advice, to teach him about Judaism so he doesn't, come off as a jerk, okay? This advisory council becomes known as the Sanhedrin, okay? The Sanhedrin was basically elite Jewish people that advised the governor on whatevers, Okay, now, remember we talked about the Israelites and the Israelite faith. Okay, what made the Israelites unique during their time period?
Monotheistic.
Yes, they were monotheistic. They only believe in one God. Okay? Now, through time, through changes, through everything, because we looked at Israelite history and all of that, eventually it morphs into the Jewish faith. Okay? And so that's where we are right here. The Jewish people are still monotheistic. Okay? That's the problem with monotheistic faiths, is that they will refuse to acknowledge the possibility of anything else out there. Okay, it is my God and that is it. Okay, so Romans come in, say blah blah blah, you don't have to accept our beliefs, but this is our belief, and you just have to acknowledge it. And when the festival of Saturnalia comes along, Jewish people, you need to send one representative to be there and blah. Okay, well, the Jewish people are like, well, no, because that goes against, the whole idea of monotheism. Okay? Now, once again, remember that it doesn't matter the belief, the philosophy, the religion, the whatever. Okay? There's always going to be like a variety and different degrees of whatever. Okay? From the most conservative to the most liberal. Okay? Amongst the Jewish people, there was a group known as the Maccabees. The Maccabees were very, very militaristic, okay? They're like the angry ones, okay? They're out there fighting, physically, all right? This isn't a spiritual war. This is an actual physical war, okay? They were the ones that fought back against, Alexander, and then they rebelled against the Seleucids, and they formed their own little tiny kingdom, all right? Eventually it gets taken over and stuff. And, of course, through tradition, through whatever, and they misinterpret, I guess, some of the writings. They know that a savior is going to come. But the Maccabees, and they're able to influence other people, they are waiting for a military savior. Okay? They are waiting for someone to come in and be all ripped and buff and muscular and raise an army and lead this army against the Romans and overthrow them. Okay, that's the savior they're waiting for. Okay, I like to, and once again, if you're offended, do that. I like to refer to him as buff Jesus or jacked Jesus or six-pack ab Jesus. All right, that's the Preston's. I know. That's the Jesus they're waiting for. Okay. What happens? Oops, the map. Instead, there is a Jesus that's born, okay, or someone who closely matches this description. And instead of being jacked, instead of having muscles, instead of being swole, and leading a military revolution, okay, he's a preacher. He's a teacher. He talks about peace and love and helping the poor and feeding the hungry and, and charity and healing the sick and stuff like that. Okay? To say that the Maccabees and other Jewish people are disappointed would be an understatement. Okay? Now, despite this, okay, he still gets a following. Okay? There are some people that do, follow him. All right? Now, just as a little FYI here, okay, Jesus was not a Christian, okay? Jesus was Jewish. He was raised a good little Jewish boy, and many of the things that he taught, okay, were in fact in line with the old Jewish faith, okay? And so, for the longest time, okay, him and his followers, and anyone who called themselves Christian, was originally just seen as another Jewish group, okay? Just another little bit of Judaism, all right? Now, at some point during his teaching, all right, Jesus is arrested for treason, okay? He's accused of trying to overthrow the government, okay? And treason is punishable by death. He's found guilty, okay? And he is executed by the Roman authorities. All right? Now, just as an FYI, okay, crucifixion was nothing special, all right? I know some of y'all, yeah, you wear the cross, all right, whatever. But crucifixion was the way that the Romans executed all of their criminals, okay? The Amorites threw you into the river, okay? The Israelites threw rocks at you, okay? Later on, the French would build a guillotine and cut your head off, okay? The Romans hung you up on a cross, all right? The reason why they did this, it is very painful, and it was a very slow death, okay? It could take anywhere from 3 to 6 days for you to die, all right? Oh, the Romans were cruel, okay? You know, they just let you hang there and slowly wither away, okay? So, he's executed, all right? Now, for a lot of reasons, if you want to talk about politics, okay, obviously, he was gaining a following. He was seen as a threat, mainly to the Sanhedrin, the group of Jewish advisors, okay, so they kind of need to eliminate their competition type of thing, okay, but, and once again, if I offend you, all right, that's not my intention, but after he's executed, his followers claim that he rose from the dead, okay? And so with this claim, they begin then to repeat his teachings, okay? They go out and start teaching the same thing that Jesus taught while he was alive, okay? And so, for a couple of years, his followers that are still around, they're out there sharing the message that this man shared. And so Christianity remains a little subsection of Judaism, right? Until a man named Paul comes along, okay? Now, just as an FYI, Paul never met Jesus, okay? Paul never interacted with him. At some point, Paul comes in contact and is converted to Christianity. The thing about Paul, number one, he's Jewish, all right, because he heard the message, all right? And at the time, it was only being taught to other Jewish people. But, and we're not 100% sure how this happened, at some point in the past, Paul's family had gained Roman citizenship, okay? And so if you think back to Friday and all of the perks of Roman citizenship, okay? Paul had Roman privilege, which gave him, okay, the freedom to do quite a bit of things, all right? And we'll talk about that in a minute, all right? In addition, though, okay, well, no, I can mention one right now, okay? Remember, one of the perks of citizenship is being able to travel, all right? So Paul could go wherever he wanted, and in his travels, he taught Christianity, okay? Jesus never left this area his entire life that he preached. His followers, Peter, James, all of those, all the disciples, never left this area, okay? Paul, on the other hand, went everywhere. Okay, so his Roman privilege came in handy, okay? Because he's Jewish, he speaks Aramaic, and this is the language that most Jewish people spoke at this time. Because he's a Roman citizen, he also speaks Latin, okay? Because he is part of the upper class of the educated elite, he also speaks Greek, okay? I once got into an argument with someone over this. Jesus did not speak any of those languages other than Aramaic. He didn't speak English, or French, or any of those. Now, someone tried to argue with me, you spoke English? No, he did not speak English. All right, no, he only spoke Aramaic, so unless you spoke Aramaic, you would not understand a thing he was saying. All right, but Paul, on the other hand, if you didn't understand Aramaic, he could switch to Latin and teach Christianity in Latin. If you didn't speak Latin, then he could switch over to Greek and he could teach you about Christianity in Greek. Okay, so Christianity really begins to grow when it comes under the leadership of Paul. All right. Now, for those of you who are Christian, hopefully you're aware, and if you're not, then I guess I'm giving you a little Sunday school lesson right now. Most of the New Testament, the bulk of it, are Paul's letters, okay, that he writes to other Christians. All right, because that's what he does for the next 20 years. Okay, he travels around teaching and preaching because remember, once again, he has Roman privilege. He can go wherever the hell he wants without being stopped. Okay, and when he's not traveling, he's writing letters. He's answering questions. He's sending out, oh, you got a question about this? Well, here's what happens. Okay, now, a couple more things. Paul is the person who talks about Jesus as Christos. Okay, Jesus never called himself Christ. It's not his name. Some people are like, oh yeah, I use you, hey, Mr. Christ. No. Family names don't become a thing until the Middle Ages. All right, so we're still about 1,000 years before that. Okay, Christos is a Greek word that means the anointed or the chosen. Okay, Paul is the one who gives him that title. We translate it into English as Christ. It's roughly equivalent to the Jewish word Messiah. Okay? Now, like I said, okay, he is a Roman citizen. All right? We can go places where the original people, all right, the original Christians could not go. All right? He can do things that the other ones cannot. Okay? Remember that one of the Roman privileges was that if you are convicted of a crime, you can appeal it, and you can even appeal it to Caesar if you want to. Paul is in fact arrested at some point. He is convicted of a crime, and he appeals it. He, in fact, appeals it to Caesar Augustus, and he's able to preach his message in front of Caesar. Okay? Jesus was convicted of treason. He didn't get to appeal anything, all right, because he was not a citizen. Okay? So Paul has this privilege. Okay? And as I've already mentioned, because he spoke multiple languages, he is able to teach a multiple group of people. Okay? He's able to teach Romans, and he's able to teach any person who has a knowledge of Greek. Okay? And remember, the Greek language by this point in time has spread everywhere that Alexander conquered, and has spread pretty much in other areas that Alexander never reached, but through the influence and travels of other Greek-speaking people, even as far east as India and the hills of Afghanistan. You had Greek cities. So this is why later on when missionaries go and, they're just able to preach in Greek. And that's why Christianity spreads the way it did. Okay? Now, a couple other things. Okay? The parts of the New Testament that are not Paul's letters or Paul's teachings or Paul's whatever, okay, the part known as the Gospels that describe Jesus' life, just be aware that those were written decades, in one or two cases, like 150 years after the actual events. Okay? So they were not written during his lifetime. Jesus never wrote them. The people around him never wrote them. If you want to argue, or if you want to send your preacher or pastor after me, I'm happy to sit. Okay, I actually have studied this. Okay, the newest one, if you want to say that, is the Gospel of John. But most scholars estimate that it was written about 45 to 50 years after. Okay, and so I often tell people, I'm 53 years old. I can barely remember what I ate this morning for breakfast. Don't ask me to tell you what happened 40 years ago, okay? I was 13. I think that was in like 8th grade, maybe 9th. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I went to school at least some day. My memory of those things is going to be spotty. But now some of you are like, I remember what I did when I was 13. I'm like, yeah, you guys are like, what, 18? That was 5 years ago. For me, it's 4 decades. Okay? Rory's like, shit. Yes. You're like, I can't remember last week, much less, that amount of time. Okay? So that wasn't written until much later. In addition, okay, and once again, don't mean to offend some of you, but I'm just looking at the facts. There are certain Egyptian ideals, if you think back to the previous chapter, when Greek theology and Egyptian theology mix and the concept of baptism becomes a thing where you soak yourself in water to commit yourself to whatever God you're going to serve, that is absorbed, okay, into this faith, all right? The Zoroastrian ideals. The ancient Israelite and Jewish faith had no concept of hell or the devil, okay? And I've actually spoken to some Jewish friends and spoken to like some Jewish scholars. There is no idea of a devil or of hell. That's a Christian thing. It came after Christian missionaries encountered Zoroastrianism. Light, dark, good, evil, pick one or the other, and in the next life you're rewarded or you're punished. Okay? So yeah. All right? Now, another FYI, remember that those Hebrew records were translated into Greek. Okay? And then everything after that is written in Greek. So all of the New Testament was written in Greek. Okay? So we have, a lot of those writings. And because they were written in Greek, as I mentioned already, people in India could access them because, they spoke a type of Greek. Bless you. People in ancient Bactria, which is Afghanistan, could read them because they were in Greek. Okay? Now, this message of peace and love and charity and feeding the hungry and helping the sick, it appealed to numerous people. We're not going to lie. This message does spread. It's a good message. Okay? But once again, Jesus only spoke to Jewish people his entire life, his entire preaching career. Okay? And he only spoke in Aramaic. All right? When Paul starts teaching Romans and Greek speakers, okay, what are they going to care about? A Jewish Savior? They're really not. All right? Very similar to Buddhism, all right, where, Buddhist monks and Buddhist missionaries try to teach people, oh, but this way you'll end up in nirvana and you won't have to reincarnate and 50 times. And McCoy says, well, I don't believe in reincarnation, so what the fuck, I don't care. If I end up in, one with the universe or eternal happiness. Okay? And so Buddhism adapts and says, okay, well, here's other ways to get to nirvana. Christianity does the same. Okay? Because non-Jewish people are not going to care about a Jewish Savior. And so Paul changes the message so that, no. Jesus wasn't just a Savior for the Jewish people. He's a Savior for everyone. Okay? Now I'm going to care. All right? Because I'm not Jewish, but if someone came to save me, okay, then yeah. All right? Now the message is a bit more applicable to me. Okay? And it was Paul who basically talked about the fact that Jesus was, and once again, it depends on which branch of Christianity you believe in, Jesus was either a demigod, God himself, or the Son of God. If you're Catholic, Protestant, whatever group you believe in, they all interpret it differently. It was Paul who came up with that concept. And once that happens, okay, Christianity is no longer a branch of Judaism, but its own religion, its own faith. Okay, I'm going to write Christianity right here. All right, when enter the concepts of baptism and heaven and hell and devils, and of course the fact that Jesus was divine. Okay, and so now it's a different thing. Okay, completely. All right. Now, contrary to what people may have taught you or whatever, persecution of Christians was actually sporadic. It really wasn't as widespread as some people make it out to be before the 300s. Okay, you gotta fast forward 300 years. After the 300s, yes, they were being thrown into the lions and fighting gladiators and all that other stuff that I'm sure your pastor probably told you about. But before the 300s, okay, all right, well, on occasion, maybe, make fun of the people who follow the dead guy, whatever, all right? But other than that, okay, there really wasn't a lot of persecution, and so Christianity continues to spread and continues to grow, okay? The message becomes much more applicable to people, and because the teaching is being done in Latin and Greek, not just Aramaic, it's reaching all kinds of people throughout the Roman Empire, okay? So that by 300, okay, there are Christian communities all over the Roman Empire, okay? They're not huge, but they're there, okay? And at that point, some of those groups do begin to cause problems for the Roman authorities, which we'll talk about in the next chapter, okay, and why that persecution then really began to jack up, all right? But it isn't until the 300s, okay, that it actually begins to happen, all right? So, questions on the history part, all right? Don't ask me, like, so what do you believe, Santos, because I'm not going to tell you, all right? All right, then, to finish off, okay, the Roman Empire, okay, basically expanded, because a lot of people ask, so why did it collapse? Why did it fall? Why does it have to end? All right. Number one, the Romans basically conquered everything there was to conquer. In Europe, to the west, they reached the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, you can't go past the ocean. All right, you're stopped there. Boom. All right, you went as far as you could. Okay. In Africa, they conquered all of North Africa, and once they tried to go through the Sahara Desert, they really couldn't, okay? It is one of the largest, most dangerous places on the planet, all right? You can't just march your Roman legions through the desert and expect them to survive and, come out the other end and conquer the rest of Africa, all right? So they're stopped by geography, okay? Now, the Romans do try to conquer towards the east. And first, we're going to look at Persia, okay? Because I've shown you different maps. Let's go back to a map, okay? The Romans do conquer Armenia and Mesopotamia briefly, okay? By this point in time, by about the 150s, okay, the Seleucid Empire has collapsed. Okay, it's gone. It's fallen apart. Okay, and so there is a power vacuum. The Romans are able to enter Mesopotamia and conquer it. Okay, and they hold on to it, I want to say, for about 26 years or so. It's part of the Roman Empire. But as history has shown us over and over and over again, okay, those Central Asian tribes that are wandering past, back and forth for the last 1,000, 7,000, 8,000 years, okay? There is a group known as the Parthians that migrate south into Iran and Iraq, okay? And they take over what used to be the Persian Empire, okay? It is the Parthians that retake Mesopotamia from the Romans. The Romans aren't strong enough to overcome this Central Asian tribe, okay? Similar to other groups that have invaded in the past, they're a horse culture, and they are awesome archers from horseback. So the Roman legions, you know, they're still using Alexander the Great tactics. They can overcome this type of fighting. Okay, so the Parthians take over that area. Okay, now after the Parthians, all right, the Parthians are conquered by another Central Asian tribe known as the Sasanians. Okay, let me back up really quick though, just to mention this. Every group that has ever conquered Persia has like fallen in love with Persian culture. Okay, Alexander, we already know what he did. The Seleucids, okay, they mixed Greek culture with Persian culture. The Parthians, they adopted Persian culture. The Sasanians, who come next, they also. And so sometimes you will hear them described as Sasanian Persians. Okay, because Sasanian culture mixes with Persian culture. Mostly, you know, they absorb Persian stuff, and later on, when future conquerors come in, including, you know, Muslims, they also adopt Persian culture, okay, to a certain degree. Now, the Sasanians, they continue to fight against the Romans because the Romans are still trying to take over Mesopotamia and stuff. But the Sasanians were pretty brutal, and they actually managed to be dominant in the area for quite a while. Okay, how brutal are they? This is still the time when leaders, when emperors led their armies from the front. So the emperor at the time is a man named Valerian, and he's leading the army. He's captured. The Sasanian king uses him as a footstool in front of his throne. He makes him get on all fours and puts his feet up. Okay? When he's tired of that, he kills him, stuffs him, and mounts him, and puts him in the throne. Okay? So that when anyone comes in and tries to start anything with the Sasanian king, he says, Nikolai, you see that guy right there? He acted the way you did. All right? He came in here making demands too. You want to be next to him? Keep it up. All right? He's like, no, we surrender. We're good. No, we're good. And so, able to use the body of this dead emperor. Okay? So, that's the East. The rest of Europe, towards Eastern Europe, the Romans made it all the way to the Rhine River, which is the traditional boundary between France and Germany. Okay? Julius Caesar was actually the one who reached this area. Caesar tried to conquer into Germany, but he failed. All right, he kind of had to turn around and come back. Okay, and so the Romans and the Germans came to a understanding. Let's say, you stay on your side of the river, we'll stay on our side. Okay. The Romans referred to the Germans as quote-unquote barbarians because they were basically unconquerable, all right, in that regard. And so, you know, but the Germans had basically existed there for thousands of years, and, you know, they really didn't do much different. Okay, we'll talk more about them in chapter 8, but just so that you're aware, okay, as the Germans and the Romans are living side by side, okay, if you recall, during the Golden Age, we talked about how in France and in Spain, the Romans start building, during the Golden Age, they start building farms and these huge plantations, and obviously they need slave labor to work it. They got their slaves from the Germans. Okay, they go, they meet with a German tribe. German tribe would say, all right, we'll be right back. They'd go in, they'd kidnap other Germans, and they'd sell them to the Romans. And the Romans were like, thank you very much, you know, come on back when you want more slaves. All right, and they would, okay? Now, fast forward about 150 years, okay? Golden Age ends, and we see a lot of civil wars. We see emperors, fighting each other. We see military leaders trying to take over, all right? And so in this case, different people, including the Roman emperor, would go to the Germans and say, you guys are pretty awesome fighters, we'd like to hire you, fight for my army. Another general comes in and says, no, fight for my army. And so German mercenaries are hired, okay, to fight in these wars that are pitting Roman against Roman. All right? Now, part of the payment for some of these tribes is land. Okay? So many of these German mercenaries are given land in modern-day France where they're able to settle down. Eventually, the Germans that are still over there in Germany are like, dude, look at how many Germans live over there already. Let's just go. And so they cross the river, they walk in, and the Germans that live there are like, hey, welcome, cousins. Yeah, come on, there's plenty of room here. And so little by little, okay, these German tribes then begin to invade the Roman Empire. Okay? Like I said, so geography, politics, war basically keep the empire from expanding bigger than what it already was. Okay? Before you go, I just have one thing I need to share. It doesn't affect us, but those of you that have class tomorrow, November 18th, tomorrow is advising day. The college is going to function as usual, except there are